Late.
That's all right. 1 minute early.
4 minutes late.
Vince Lombardi time.
You'd be all over that. You'd be all over Lombardi, Tom.
Great, mate. We've got it. Everyone's just joining in now too, so we'll just give them a couple of minutes before we get underway.
Yeah, no worries.
Matt, you'll see that there's a Q&A there as well, so we'll get some of the coaches out there or people out there that are participating just to ask us some questions so we can look at that towards the end.
Yeah, no worries.
But one from David, mate, we'll go for about 50 odd minutes is the plan. It depends how good half stories are, really.
It's true. Could be, just bring a pillow.
Mate, you got to go to bed. You're going to be up in like 3 hours.
How did you get that question? I can't see the questions. I can see the Q&A bit.
Q&A? Dave, yeah.
I logged onto that.
Sure, maybe
so they'll just filter through all that through the evening.
Yeah, they'll just filter through. How does it feel that the shoe's on the other foot, mate? You're usually interviewing people.
I'm not comfortable, I must admit. I much prefer to ask the questions and answer.
Well, mate, I'm not comfortable on this side of the coin either, just quietly. I'm a real amateur.
I'll give you some feedback afterwards.
Yeah, okay, great. Send it.
Look at my shiny head. Very shiny.
I might talk about that. I reckon that my shiny head and your shiny head, I think you had hair when you started coaching, didn't you?
I did.
Classic.
I did. Very disappointing.
We've got good numbers again rocking up, which is fantastic. This has been Max Mentors. The last two have been fantastic and the engagement is great. So we'll just give a couple more minutes for people to join, but then we'll get underway, Half.
Yep. No worries, buddy.
You got any game plan on your whiteboard back there?
No, I'm not sure what's on the back there. What's that one? Oh, that's another little business I'm getting involved in.
Yeah, okay, cool.
That's mine, and then that one behind there, or that one for you, is my daughter's business where she's opening an eyelash business. We're putting that together.
Oh, nice.
So she's a little bit entrepreneurial, so we're going to give it a go, see how it happens.
Yeah, great.
But that's all those three doors have got whiteboards all over, so it's just I have a hell of a time playing with magnets and drawing up game plans and drills and all sorts of shit. Fantastic.
All right, let's get underway, mate. I'll start with a bit of an intro on Half. So thanks everyone for joining us. Max Mentors number 3. I reckon we're really fortunate to have Daniel Harford here with us tonight. Not only from a coaching perspective, but has an extensive profile with media. We won't get too much into that, Half, today, but a bit of a background to Half, just for those of you that don't know him, was the 8th draft pick from Northern. Was it Northern Knights back then, Half?
Yeah, Northern Knights back then, yeah.
Yeah, back in '94 to the Hawks. Played 153 games with the Hawks as a these days it's called an inside mid. I don't know what was it called back then, but
just an on-baller back then, mate.
Yeah, on-baller, but inside mid, hard at it. Traded to Carlton in 2003. Spent a season there. Added another 9 games to his tally. Then went on to play VFA and VFL. I think we might have crossed paths in the VFL when you were playing for Northern Bullets, half in 06. Played a couple of games against you then. Then you went and played at Baldwin, which I want to explore today. You were there for 5 years as their coach as well, playing coach to start with, and then on the sidelines. You then coached St. Kevin's in the Victoria Amateur Football League. Went on from there to be the assistant coach of the Collingwood AFLW team in 2018. Stop me if I've missed anything. And then, mate, you did a fantastic achievement from coaching. Get the head coaching job. We briefly talked about it before we met tonight. Of the Carlton AFLW team. So we'll talk about how you've taken them from bottom of the ladder to grand final in their first year in 2019, and 2020 was your second season, and unfortunately that was cut short due to COVID-19. So I'm sure you've got bigger and better things planned going forward there. I mentioned it before as well, a successful media career, hosting his own shows. So you are feeling uncomfortable now because you're in the recipient seat. So it's on me. Currently the host of Breakfast Club on RSN 927 in Melbourne. Where else does that go, Half? Is that in Victoria?
Goes into Tassie as well. So Victoria,
as well.
Tassie, all through Victoria and all through Tassie.
Yeah, so Half needed to be in bed 30 minutes ago, so we've got to keep this short. Family life, married to Beck, daughter Abby and son William. So, mate, thanks for joining us. I know it's past your bedtime, as you said, but Julia from Coach AFL was fantastic in organising this, and I couldn't think of a better person to have Max Mentors 3 with.
Happy to help, mate. Nice to be a part of it. So, yeah, it's going through all that. I've been around a while. All that says to me is I've been around a while, Pods.
Yeah, and you had a full head of hair before you started coaching, as I said before.
Well, that's the sad part. I don't know what's happened there. I don't know where that and the light shining right down on it too.
Yeah, I know. You got to get light from the front, I've worked out, not from the top.
I'm thinking the studio setup. This is just the study.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, mate, first question, I asked this of all our mentors to start with. Why did you choose footy when you were a kid? Did you play any other sports? But why was it footy?
Yeah, I did play other sports. I'm one of 5 kids. I'm the middle child, and it's definitely a syndrome. It's a problem. I'm still dealing with it. But I'm the third boy. It was 3 boys in a row, then two girls at the end, so 5 of us. And after school and weekends and any spare time in the backyard was cricket and footy. That's how it was back when I was growing up in the northern suburbs of Melbourne. And I was pretty competitive. I had a bit of a temper, and I would try and beat my brothers. I wanted to be better than my brothers. My oldest brother used to punch me up a bit and dominate. He was 3 or 4 years older, so he had the wood on me from a skills perspective, from a physicality perspective, athleticism perspective, but I kept hunting. So, yeah, I was just pretty competitive. So cricket was I really loved cricket, and I was really good at footy. And that was probably the order. I love the game of cricket because every ball's a battle. Doesn't matter if you're fielding, bowling, batting. Every ball's a battle. It's just a brilliant game, I reckon. And you got to survive the day to be the master of it. So I really enjoyed cricket, and I really gave myself a lot of time to play cricket and wanted to be a really good cricketer. But I was good at footy, and then when you start getting reward and some real positivity on the back of being good at something, yes, that's sort of helps you learn the love of it too, and you think that maybe, gee whiz, maybe there's something I could do down the track. Now, we all dream of playing in the AFL, and I did certainly VFL was back then, from a young boy, as a Collingwood supporter, and we'd go to the Magpies home games at Vic Park every home game. We'd go on the road for a few games as well a year, so I'd see 16, 17 games a year when I was a Collingwood supporter with my mum and her sisters and a couple of kids floating around in the back of the car as well. And it was fantastic. And that's where I sort of learned to love footy, was by watching footy and going to Collingwood and seeing my heroes in action. But yeah, cricket was my real love initially. And then footy sort of took over when I worked out I was pretty good at it. And there might have been something in it for me down the line.
Yeah, right. Fantastic. Great intro. Coaches out there always ask us about how to bring fun back to footy. So taking yourself back to being a kid and playing footy, what actually made you happy at that stage? And then when you started playing AFL, what made you happy about playing footy?
Footy, the freedom footy gave you to express yourself. And I had some outstanding mentors. They were my coaches in junior footy, but they weren't really coaching. They were just supporting an environment where you could go and play the game and love it. And I really appreciate, looking back now, I really appreciate how they did that and what they did. And it wasn't about tactics and strategy and craft and that sort of stuff. It was about play. It was about the game. They gave us the freedom, because I think footy is quite unique. And there's a few other field sports that would be similar, I imagine. I didn't play soccer as a kid or that type of thing. But when you've got so much space to cover, I think the way you can express yourself physically and just roam with freedom, even though there are positions, or there certainly were back when I first started, on the magnet board, I think the freedom of footy is what I loved and what I really enjoyed. And training there was some drills and you just kick some goals at the end. You get to kick a few torps and life was good. It wasn't overly stressful. It was essentially play.
Yeah.
And I love that about footy, that I just got to play and do stuff and touch the footy and get my mates involved from school. Most of my team was from my primary school, so we'd hang out together in the day and we go and kick the footy at night time and then play on the weekends. And it was just great to have that community environment, that environment of your mates being together in a game. And the basketball, I played basketball as a kid as well, but there's 5 or 6 on the team and it's over in 40 minutes and who knows what happens from there. But footy is something different. Footy, the breadth of people you need for footy and the support cast that goes with a footy team, be it juniors or be it seniors, doesn't matter. There's people there to help and put that all together. And I really enjoyed that environment of people. And essentially, footy is about people, isn't it? The grand scheme of things. So that was what I loved as a kid. And we got to the AFL, clearly it gets a bit more serious and a bit more structured and that type of thing. But I was the guy that was always looking for the cheap gag and the backstroke and I was drawn to those personalities that had a bit of charisma and knew that whilst it was a very important thing and it was our jobs, that it was pretty fun too, and it should be a pretty fun thing to do. And sometimes that's easier to live than other times, because if you're in a successful team, you can sort of roll with that a bit, as you well know, Pods. But if you're in a pretty crap team like we were at the Hawks in the first couple of years of my career, then it's not a lot of fun, because everything's on the line and there's people's careers at stake and coaches under pressure and that type of thing. So it was a real balance for me at the AFL level, because I wanted to be able to have that fun and freedom, but there was constraints that sort of kept it under wraps for a little while.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? And we sort of talked earlier offline about we'll get to you coaching the Carlton team, but when you got your first win, the whole mood just changes and your ability to actually bring your personality out.
Yeah.
It's so different, isn't it? Wins and losses. Go back to when you were 18, 19, coming in through the ranks of an AFL club. How do you remember learning? Like, how did you learn best as a player? Were you a visual learner? Did you read? Did you watch vision? How was it for you?
Yeah, I was a doer. I wanted to be learning on the job, and I'm actually really big on this from a coaching perspective, and it doesn't suit everyone, but I think it suits the majority to be able to learn while you live and learn is what I call it. Be out there training in scenarios that are something you'll experience on game day, as close to a game day as you can replicate at the training session. And I'm really big on that, particularly in women's footy, where they're coming from backgrounds where they haven't had a decade of footy. Most of these girls haven't started at 7 and played all the way through the pathways, because there was none initially. So they need to live it to learn it. Outside of that, there wasn't a lot of video editing going on. We get the old VHS cut up.
Yeah.
Probably take them till Tuesday by the time they were ready after the weekend. There was one man doing it, cutting 21 tapes or 22 tapes every week, and it took him bloody forever. So the video stuff wasn't as forensic and anywhere near as analytical and such a good learning resource as it is these days, and the way they do it, and behind the goals vision, there's none of that.
Yeah.
So it was more living and learning than anything else. You talk through situations with your line coach, and Chris Connolly was awesome for me. I really learned a hell of a lot from Chris Connolly through my time at Hawthorn. That he would talk me through how he saw me needing to play and how I best execute that. But it was more about the scenario stuff, the match practice, and playing against Johnny Platten in the midfield and trying to work out how I was going to beat him because he's a megastar. Those things about trying to find answers to solutions was in almost reality was the best way I learned.
Do you reckon that it was magnified in games or training? So obviously one of the things you sort of mentioned there was live and learn. So with living and learning, you're going to make mistakes. So how do you actually currently embrace your players to make mistakes at training versus in a game? Like what's the sort of feedback that you give them off the back of that?
Yeah, well, I'll never give anyone a cook if you've tried to do the right thing. If you make a mistake, that's cool. That's good. Make a skill error, particularly, that's cool. We'll try and rectify that. We'll try and make you a more complete footballer with your craft. That's our job as coaches. That's my job, to try and reinforce and enhance those areas. But if you're trying to do the right thing in terms of system or pattern or structure or whatever it is, and you make a mistake doing that, that's okay. And sometimes it's going to cost us a goal, and sometimes it might even cost us a match. But you won't cop a cook from me, because if you're trying to do the right thing, that's all I can ask you to do. Because we're not perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. I'll make mistakes as a coach. But as long as I'm focused on what we're trying to get, the outcomes we're trying to get, and sometimes I'll make a really good call on the back of that, and sometimes I'll make a crap one, and there'll be ramifications either way. But I want the girls to learn, particularly now, coaching women, I want them to learn that they can just do what I want them to do, and whatever happens after that is in the lap of the footy gods a bit. They're in control of it, but it's a bit in the lap of the footy gods. So we will constantly rehearse what we want to do through those scenarios, through those situations of gameplay as much as possible, so they get the feeling of what that looks like. It's easy on a whiteboard to put the X's and O's and draw the arrows and move the magnets, but the game's not played on the whiteboard. It's not played with magnets and arrows. It's such a dynamic game that I just think you have to be able to live it, to really understand what that feels like. And it's proprioception. It's repetition. It's rehearsal. It's repeat. It's lather, rinse, repeat, mate. It's washing your hair, which you and I don't do much of anyway.
Mate. That lesson is relevant not just to sport and football, but life, business. I mean, media. Learning through mistakes and actually just getting out in there and doing and moving on. But as long as you've got the right behaviours, I suppose, is what you're saying. So those lessons are across all parts of life. Hey, clearly we've been going for 10 minutes or so, and you've got a clear passion for football, but and coaching. What is it that you love about coaching, and why is coaching for you?
I was one of those guys. I'm not sure how you were when you were playing pods, but I was one of those guys when I was in the team meetings. I was always front left. I had my seat at the front left. It was like the bus at the school. You're all the same seats.
Yeah.
So I was front left always. So sometimes you're out of the line on the side of the coach when he's getting really fired up, and they sort of look over you, which is good. But I was front left, and I paid a lot of attention because I love footy and I love playing the game of footy. And I often sit there and think about how I would do things or what I thought about was happening. And in those days, you weren't really encouraged to get too involved in the conversation. You were coached. It wasn't over a discussion. It was a message coming from the coach more often than not. So we didn't really get the freedom to get involved in the conversation. But I always thought about how would I do that, and why is he doing that, and why are we doing this, and is that the best thing for this group? And all the way through, I thought, well, one day I'm going to have a crack at it myself, and see, and put it all together and see if it does work. See if I can manage a team to become better. And in the end, once I got that sort of through and I got my chance, it's making people better. It's giving people the chance to achieve something that they might not have been able to do without you. That's not to say that you're the be all and end all, but where the coach obviously sets up the program and forms a pattern of play, a style of play with a group of people that are coming from all over the shop to do that. Now that takes a lot of effort, and any coach in the room who's listening tonight understands how difficult and how big a challenge that can be. That you've got a group of players that sometimes you are from all over the place. Sometimes you've got a little community hub that they filter through to, a junior club that filters through, and that's great. But it's about bringing a group of people together with different beliefs, with different abilities, with different passions, with different backgrounds, and putting that into one team every single week and trying to get an outcome for all. Like, that's a huge challenge, but how satisfying is it when you're able to pull it off? So letting them experience something really cool and trying to make them better and love the game like I got to love it through my time. That's why I do it, and that's why I'll do it for a fair while, I reckon, because so the response you get and the feedback you get from players, and when you get it right, and the effect and the impact it has on their lives, as silly as it sounds, and it's a game, we all understand that, but the impact of being able to help someone succeed in anything is unbelievably satisfying. So that's what keeps me going. I think that's quite intoxicating.
Mate, fantastic answer. And listening to hear you talk, and you think about coaching over the last 30, 40 years, I think back in the day, the coach was seen as the expert that had to have all the answers. It was almost like, no disrespect to the people that coached, 30 years ago, but they're like the Messiah, effectively, weren't they? It was like, come now, I've got to. Whereas now, coaches are, facilitators and educators and teachers, and need to facilitate the right questions to get the best response from their players, not just tell them where to stand or tell them what to do. It has changed a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think the old saying is it takes a village. And whilst the coach is really important, you need that many people on side who are assisting you in that process. It's not funny. And coaches are the ones that get sacked and they get all the praise when things are going well. But it's so much bigger than that. And that's another challenge and another part of coaching that is the subset of the player, of the player success, is achieving or having a group of coaches with you that understand how you want to do it. You let them be a part of the conversation. You mold that into something really cool. And then you're all involved in the process of dispersing that information and teaching and coaching. And that's another layer of coaching I reckon doesn't get spoken about very much, about how you deal with your other coaches and what chemistry and camaraderie you build with them to coach together your group of players. And it's absolutely underestimated, the importance of that, I reckon.
Yeah, the training the trainer model, effectively, that is what that is.
Yeah.
You talked about, support around you. One thing obviously is close to everyone is family. I want to talk to you about, being a dad, and, William and Abby are your two kids, but how is being a dad? We've got a lot of actually dad coaches that are either coaching their under 12s girls team or boys team out there tonight listening. How has that helped you in coaching?
Being a father transformed my whole life. I was at Carlton in 2004 when we had our first child, Abby, who's now close enough to 16 in a week or two. And you very quickly, anyone who is a parent will understand this, I think, that you go from, particularly from a professional sporting perspective, pods like you and I, that you go from being the most important person in the family to being the least.
Yeah.
And that happens really quickly. So my world spun when Abby was born, and it was the July of 2004. It was my year at Carlton, and my whole world changed. My whole perspective on what was important changed. And I was 27 when that happened. And then I saw her out the year, and I had another year to go on my contract, and I got through the pre-season the off season, and was getting ready to get back for pre-season. So I decided to go for a run a couple of weeks beforehand, and I stopped about 500 meters in, and I just turned around and walked home. And I said to Beck, she looked at me, she goes, "That was quick." And I sat down on the couch and I said to her, "I don't want to do this anymore. It doesn't mean what it did to me anymore. It's my whole world had spun. The axis had changed angle, and it wasn't what I wanted to do. It became a business, and it wasn't the fun and the game that I'd loved, as I spoke about before, and I didn't want to do it anymore. So her impact on me was quite profound, and it's been interesting because I didn't have anything to go to at the time. So it was a decision, but I didn't love playing anymore. It wasn't the game that I grew up loving playing. So I said to Beck, "I'm out." So that certainly affected my life. But then the coaching, how it affected my coaching, I did this a couple of years ago with Ab. She was doing her maths homework in year 7, I think it might have been. And maths was my thing at school. I was a good mathematician. I like numbers.
Hello.
Well, coaches are nerds in some degree. So I like numbers, and she was asking for some help, and I'm sitting there with her at the table, and she couldn't get. It was just a bit of basic algebra stuff, which you should know if you're an adult. So I had that covered. So I'm sitting there explaining, this is how you get to the answer. Multiply the factors and all that sort of stuff, and you get to your answer. And she sat there and she couldn't get it. And I started to get really frustrated because I knew it. I knew that I knew it, and I was trying to get the message out to her that, can't you see that this is how we do it? Just that and that equals this. And she couldn't get it, and she was getting really upset. And I was getting more frustrated the more upset she was getting. Now, bloody hell, how easy is it? Shit. And I stopped before we sort of got into a bit of a punch on. I stopped myself and I thought, hang on a second. Just because you know, it doesn't mean that she knows. So that was a really important conversation just with myself and my coaching, because that really changed the way I delivered messages to players, because it wasn't about what I knew, it was about what they knew. And if they didn't know, it wasn't on them, it wasn't on me to get frustrated with them, it was on me to coach them and take them through it step by step and add the layers as we needed to go to get to the outcome we needed to get to. So a little bit of year 7 algebra transformed my whole coaching philosophy and how to deal with players that, because you get these really intelligent players who understand everything you're saying. Then you got the other extreme, of course, is the players who really struggle with that sort of stuff and have no idea what you're saying. So you've got to paint the picture very differently. So that little exercise with my year 7 algebra made me very clear about my behaviour and my method of transfer of information to my players from that day forward. And I think I've been a much better coach since that year 7 algebra class.
Well, mate, we know that the AFL have got 6 core coaching competencies, and one of them is actually the ability to learn and reflect as a coach. So it's not obviously just on game day or training. You've actually done it in your normal life and your kids' life. That has actually allowed you to learn and reflect in that scenario, which has actually been implemented in your coaching. So that's a great story. Hey, we'll get into your part-time, pseudo part-time coaching. And there's no such thing as part-time coaching. But how do you at the moment, handle your work-life balance, coaching balance, and family? Currently, I suppose this environment is probably a little bit different, but think back to when you're training at Carlton on a rainy Wednesday night.
Yeah, well, I think the most demanding time in my life was coaching local footy.
Yeah,
where it's an 11-month job basically, minimum, and you're working 3 or 4 nights a week. Plus all the meetings and all the phone calls and all that sort of stuff, plus trying to have your job and plus trying to look after your family. So that period between 2012, when the kids were sort of 7 and 4, to 2016, that was a really, really challenging period because I wasn't home a lot. I was working during the days. You're training, coaching all night. You're not getting home till 9, 10, who knows. Selection night's a bit later. Every Thursday night's always later because of dinner with the club. Always happens like that. Let alone you're watching the videos and you're cutting your tape for Monday review and all that sort of stuff. So that was and then I was working weekends covering AFL game, broadcasting AFL games. So I wasn't home and I was traveling to state through that a fair bit as well. So that was a really challenging period. But what you need is, what I had and what I needed was an understanding wife, and Beck certainly knew that coaching was one of the things that I needed to do for me. And she would say that often, I know you need to do this for you. If you didn't have something like this, that you drive us all bananas anyway. So you might as well go and do that upside and be a part of it. And I had such support. So you need support from the people around you, and that the kids were great, and they would come along, and I would take them to training when I could, and they'd be there match day, and they blow the whistle at training, and they move some magnets and draw some stuff on the whiteboard for me at training, and I got them involved in the club life, which was great. And I think it's really important for kids to see club life, whatever that is, hockey, tennis, football, basketball, whatever it is, to be a part of a bigger community and understand what that looks like. That's really important. So I had great support. Sometimes, mate, when you just got lots on, you just make things work. It's like the old saying, want something done properly, give it to someone who's busy, because I'll work out how to make it work. And I was one of those guys that the more you threw at me, I didn't necessarily love it all the time, but we just made it work. And because I did love the coaching component, it was certainly a labour of love.
Yeah, you just go into execution mode when you've got lots on. That's what
you've got no choice.
What you do. So I'll use coaching part-time in inverted commas, but it's obviously a challenge, whether you're coaching at Baldwin or coaching the Carlton AFLW team. I'm trying to think, I haven't been in this position, but how do you actually go fast when it comes to, building a game plan, educating players, but slow at the same time? And you sort of mentioned it a little bit earlier. One of the other core competencies of coaching is being able to build relationships. Now, that is so tough to do when you're a part-time coach. Yeah. Can you sort of talk to me about how you've navigated that, whether it's at Baldwin or whether now it's at AFLW, and how you do that?
Yeah, well, at locals footy, the relationship part is really challenging because same, I suppose, with the girls a bit, but because everyone's working or at the uni, and you're working, and I'm really lucky now that I work in the morning, so I've got basically the rest of the day off if I want to, if I'm not snoozing or walking the dogs. So it's a bit easy for me now. But back when I was working through the middle of the days and the family life and all that sort of stuff, the relationship part's really hard. So it's about maximising the time you get with your group. You might be able to catch up with a coffee every now and then with a couple of players a week, but even that would be challenging in this current environment. But so it's about maximising that 3 to 5 minute chat you get while the boys are warming up or in the change rooms or post training or in between a drill when you go around the back of the group and just have a chat to someone. I think those conversations are, from a local footy perspective, are the most important ones you can have, to just touch base and say good day. Because sometimes players, particularly if you're at a big club, and whilst at St Kevin's we had 5 teams, not that I was coaching all of them, but they're all there out there in the park at one stage. They all want to hear from the senior coach. Doesn't matter what level they play, everyone wants to hear from the senior coach. Assistant coaches are fine, they're fantastic. Reserves coaches are great. Thirds coaches are awesome, but everyone wants to hear from the senior coach. So it's little touch points, and it's understanding that that's what they want, and that comes with experience. I didn't know that at the start when I was a ball. When I was a bit like you're saying before, that the guy up the front with the whistle and this is how we do things, and just follow the arrows. I've certainly evolved a lot since those days. So relationships are a huge part of coaching or managing any team. But when you've got such limited time, where you've got to execute a template of drills and a system of playing to try and educate, those little conversations, 2-3 minutes it might be, they're really important. You've got to nail them and let them know that you love them, or think that you love them. You might not necessarily love all of them, but they've got to think that you love them. And that's a great art in itself. So that's a real challenge, that relationship perspective. And then you've got to build a plan. Then you've got to teach the whole system to the whole group. So I was very clear, and this started to come through my time at St Kevin's, that I had a vision, an end goal, but we were very, very clear that we weren't going to start there. And the same thing at Carlton. We had a vision of what I wanted to look like, but we were starting absolutely at the fundamentals. We're going all the way back and building our platform from a really strong foundation. And that seemed to be really well appreciated. And once you've got those foundations built, you can throw the layers really quick, but it's that foundation that builds the whole thing. And I think some coaches get too excited about game plans and structures and tactics and that sort of stuff, when I think if you can pick the thing up, we're half a chance. We're half a chance. And this was what I did with the Carlton girls the first year. They'd had a rough couple of years. And it was about, and I could have come in and said, we've got this really sexy game plan, and we're going to do this from the start. But I stripped it right back and said, we know what we're doing from the start. We're building all the way down the bottom, and we're going to build up from there. And it's fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals. We've spent about 4 weeks doing ground balls. Because if you can't pick it up where the ball is most of the game, you're not much good to anyone. So let's start there and let's build from there. And that's what it was. It was building a really solid foundation and adding layers. Some coaches get that opportunity, get that chance through time in the system. Some coaches don't. They moved on, or they have other things they have to leave the job for. But if you've got some time, I still think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah. I'll just touch on, I think, for what it's worth, mate, and you're the expert here. I'm just the guy that's interviewing you. But I reckon right now there's probably a bit of an unrealistic expectation on coaches to continue to build relationships. I think it's an easy thing to say, and you sort of hate seeing in the media at AFL level, a coach sort of goes by the wayside, whether it's an assistant coach or whatever. Oh, he failed to build relationships. She failed to build relationships. Whereas relationships, as we know, are a two-way street. So there's this education that needs to go on with players and coach, that, it's not up to the coach to get around to, in your case, at Ballin or wherever you were before that or after that, that it's 50 players you can get to. You can't get to 50 players. Players might need to come to you. So yep. There's a bit of an expectation. There's probably an education that coaches need to do, and educating your players around, building relationships is on you as well. It's not just on coaches.
And we would have those conversations. I would have those conversations with whichever teams I've been coaching, because I reckon that's a really important point, that they know, and because they know it too. They know I can't get to 50 or 80 or however many players are on the list.
Absolutely.
They know that. So if they need something or they're lacking something, it is on them a bit. I mean, essentially it's their career, isn't it? I'm just the one that's sort of navigating the overall picture, or the coach is the one navigating the overall picture, but it's their career, it's their time in the game that they should be trying to get the most out of. If they really love it, and they're doing it because they love it more often than not at local footy level, local sport level, it's their time in the game. So they do need to understand that. They do need to understand that they've got an opportunity, and they just need to pull you aside for a minute or two every now and then and say, well, hang on, how come this is happening? Or why do you think I'm sort of sitting here at the moment? Or how do I get better? Or whatever those conversations might be. It is on them. No doubt about that. No doubt.
Hey, you mentioned fundamentals. What a great word, by the way. You mentioned it multiple times, which is even better. Take me back to Baldwin or St Kevin's. What does teaching fundamentals look like at that level?
Yeah, well, it's about fundamentals for me is the basic skills and then the basic offensive and defensive patterns. That's fundamentals for me.
Yeah.
How to spoil properly, how to get the ball to spin properly when you're kicking it to a teammate, how to put it to their advantage, how to pick the ball up, the biomechanics, the techniques involved in picking it up off the ground. Put your fingers down to the bottom, bend your knees, keep your back bloody straight, all that sort of stuff. Like really basic Oz kick sort of stuff.
Great.
It's that. It's just there's more pressure on, there's bigger bodies, it's coming at you a bit faster, you have to execute a bit quicker. So then it becomes a decision-making situation. But if you can't get the fundamentals biomechanically or technically for the basic skills of the game, then you are no chance of having any success as a team. If your squad members can't do those things, you're no chance. I don't care what level of coach you are and what grade it is. If you can't teach them the really simple things of the game, really simple things and components of the game, you're no chance. And that's fine. If that's what you've got and you know that, then your definition of success is different to somebody else's. And that's a really important part of coaching too, understanding what success looks like to you and for your group. Because it's not going to be the same for every team. Not every team is capable of finishing in finals or winning a premiership. Some teams might be looking to win a half a footy every weekend. Some might be looking to just win 3 games a year. And how do we do that? And you break that down. So success, the definition of success is really important. But back to your question about the fundamentals, it's the really basic building blocks of the game and rehearsing that. So understanding, okay, I've got this group and just do through basic drills that everyone would understand and know, and watching a group and seeing how someone drops the ball under their foot and working out if that can be fixed, because sometimes it can't be fixed. To any great degree anyway, and how natural that is, how they jump at the footy, do they run under the ball all the time, can they read it, do they need glasses, all that. Like these are the things that you go through and you work out. I've got 2 people sets of glasses. I've worked out 2 people couldn't see.
Yeah, wow.
Because they run under the ball, they just couldn't find the ball, they run under it. We end up getting their eyes checked, they needed bloody glasses. No wonder they couldn't see.
Fundamentals 101.
Yeah, see the thing. So yeah, it's a really simple building blocks of the game, and there's nothing scientific about it. But it's assessing groups because you want to try and get through as many. If you're a local club, get through as many as you can to understand what they can and can't do any given time. So it's getting 8 to 10 at a time doing one thing and letting the others do another drill while that's happening, and then flipping it around and working out what you've got. That's the key thing, I think, when you first take a job as a coach, any level. Understand what you've got, because then you can build around that.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk about Carlton AFLW, mate. You took them from bottom of the ladder to a grand final in your first year. So I know part of the answer to this question would be fundamentals, because that's what you would have focused on. But when you actually got the reins, what helped you achieve that, I suppose, massive spike in success and improvement? And I'd love to sort of delve down in how did you shape the environment rather than just the fundamentals? How did you shape the environment to get these girls to believe they could actually achieve a grand final appearance?
Yeah, well, good question. There's a lot of layers to that one. So, as I mentioned before, it had been a pretty tough couple of years. And I think what they needed with a new coach, whoever that was, ended up being me, what they needed was for someone to come in and believe that they were good enough. Yeah. And that's and the art of coaching, I suppose, is getting people to believe that they can. And that was one thing I was really strong on. It's one of the reasons I took the job, because I quite liked the list. I didn't want to take a team at the bottom of the ladder just for the sake of a team at the bottom of the ladder to see what you could do. But there's a bit of talent on the list. So I just thought, again, back to the conversation before, that after watching a few games, how would I work with this group differently? And I did believe that they had some talent, and I did believe that something could be achieved. Now, I didn't ever, for the life of me, thought it was going to be a grand final appearance, and we were the beneficiaries of a conference system, and we got a few things go away from that perspective. But we were the best team in that conference by a margin. So we got to that point. But it was about belief that they could. And I'll never forget the day that things changed. And you alluded to it before. We got beaten in the first game. A really positive build up pre-season. We saw great development from skills, but also fitness levels and just confidence in themselves as individuals. We're clearly didn't get a chance to play too often through that pre-season, just the way the AFLW is set up. So we went down to Hobart for the first game of the year, and we played North Melbourne, who were the new team at that stage in the competition with all these mega stars from other clubs, and I thought we'd go all right. We got absolutely mauled. by the Kangas down there, and it was a real eye opener for me, but also for the girls. But what it does do is just it sets your level, it sets your expectations for that particular moment in time, and moving forward, you know where you are. Then you can work from there. I reckon if you start to just brush that off or believe other things other than the reality, so you've got to be really realistic as a coach. If you don't believe the reality, you can't achieve, because you'll be stuck in an area that actually doesn't exist. So we worked out that, okay, this is what happened, and we broke it down as to why, but we didn't lose too much faith out of it. We just lost the game. We just weren't good enough at that given time. So our messaging at the time, going back to the environment part of the question, we had Shannon McFerrin, who is a women's footy legend. She's a 10-time VWFL best and fairest, 5-time All-Australian, like just medals coming out of her ear holes. And she was my assistant coach at Collingwood when I was an assistant. So she was my assistant at Collingwood. So she was the first person I called in. So I wanted to have a really good credentialed female coach to be a part of the crew. She was there. Stephen Salopek, who many people know through his time at Port Adelaide, was a pick six. I coached him at St. Kevin's. I knew he knew the game I wanted to coach. So I ripped him out of there and got him to coach. And then I got Brad Fisher, who many people don't remember from his days at the Blues, 99 games with the Blues, couldn't quite get into 100, the big fish lips. And I played with him in 2004. I wanted a Carlton flavour as well. So there's a bit of science behind the building of the team. And Fish is one of the great personalities in the world. So that helps. And then our back office staff of our high performance manager, Josh Milner, was working the Eastern Rangers in the under-18s. I met him and instantly fell in love with him. And the way he talked about conditioning and athletes and footballers as opposed to female footballers and all this lingo he used, I just thought, this is our guy. He's turned out to be an absolute jet. And then the physio was there since day one, Riley. She's a magician. So we had a really good template of senior staff at the footy club, and really good people who just really wanted this program to be the best it could be. So we lost that first game. Getting back to that, talking on a bit, sorry. We lost that first game, and then we played the home game against Adelaide, and we were on fire. And the first three quarters we were really good. Played a really strong game at Icon Park. Missed a couple of chances late. Should have kicked another 2 goals in the third quarter. Should have been 3 goals up. I think we might have been 1 goal up. And then with 10 minutes to go, we're still 10 points up, and we get overrun and beaten by another 10 points or whatever it was. But we showed that we could. We were better than the week before. And it wasn't necessarily, going back to my definition of success and what it looks like for your team, our success wasn't necessarily being the best at that time. Our method and our message for the team for the year was to be better.
Yep.
And that takes a lot of pressure off being the best. You don't have to be, when you're coming from the bottom, you don't expect to be the best anyway. But our message was to be better. So we showed from week 1 to week 2 that we were better. And then we went up to GWS, Bankstown. Bankstown, is that what it's called? Yeah, Bankstown.
Yep.
To play the Giants in round 3. And we just needed a kill. You could just feel, even though we're trying to keep it positive and the energy up, and we're better than last week and we're better than the week before, you could still feel the start of the real withdrawal of some of the players, because they hadn't won for a game of footy for over a year. And that starts to eat at you after a while. And it was only 7 games, but it was over a year. So we just needed a kill. So we were able to build a really specific plan for that day for the Giants that I thought we could manipulate them a bit and beat them on a almost system as above anything else. So we put that in place, and we trained that through the week, and they got a bit of confidence out of that, because they started to believe, because we painted the picture of why we're doing this, and then we trained it, and they saw the benefits of that they went up in the state and had real confidence, and we smacked them. We beat them by 5 goals and was never had. It was a really polished performance. And I used the analogy, Michael, I'm not sure if you heard this story, Michael Voss used at the Brisbane Lions about running to the raw. And it's a really good analogy for facing your fears. It's if the antelope in the wild in the Serengeti, and you got the lions coming at you, what the lions do is they'll send the old decrepit lions out the front, face on, and they'll start roaring at you, and they'll flank you with all the young lions who are going to get you. If you're the impala or whoever you're going to be, it's going to get eaten. So what most of the impala do is they flee sideways or backwards from where the roar's coming from, because they're afraid of that. They don't want to get eaten. Nobody wants to get eaten. It's a bad thing. So they run away, but they fall into the trap, because all the other lions, they've been flanked and they get eaten, they are killed, and it's all over. So the challenge is to run to the raw, run to where the noise is coming from, face that fear and see what you can achieve. And I love that. And they'd never heard that story. And I used it as our real pre-game speech, and they fell in love with it. And they kept referencing it through the game. Run to the raw, run to the raw. And once you get your players chanting things that you've said in a pre-game, you know you're home.
Oh, yeah, you are
you
done.
know you're home. So I got them to believe that they can run to the raw and tackle their fears and come out and be triumphant. And they got the reward for effort. And from that moment on, and we talked about it in the Monday night review, at the end of it, I said, how are you feeling? We sat very casually in front of the group and said, how are you feeling? And all of them just said, oh, it's so bloody relieved.
Yeah.
Because there was that much pressure on them. It's a short season, which is pressure enough. Hadn't won a game for over a year, and they just wanted to experience what that feeling felt like again. And that was the turning point of the whole game. Then there was a real energy for the whole season. And we lost a game we shouldn't have the next week, and then we won all the other games leading into the finals. And we had a really positive year until the grand final. We played 12 minutes of really bad footy, and Adelaide kicked 6, and it was all over.
Yeah. Tough. With 50,000, wasn't it one of the most highest attended female sports in Australia at the time, which is fantastic, and that's where footy's headed. So those local coaches or community coaches out there, I mean, face the fear head on is what you're sort of saying, and potentially ask for a friendly fixture from the governing body. Get an easy kill in round 1 or 2.
It's always helpful. Early wins, mate. Doesn't matter where they are. Early wins are important.
We've got a cheeky question here in the chat, mate. When Hawthorn's AFLW get a team, are you going to jump ship? Answer that, mate.
No, I will answer it because Beck Goddard is coaching their VFLW team.
Oh, actually, great
this year. So, although there's no VFLW, unfortunately, with the whole COVID situation, which is a bit of a shame. There's a super series, a spring series of 3 games, but you can check more details out on the website. So Beck is a premiership coach, obviously, with Adelaide in the first year of the AFLW. So I'm not sure she's going to be too easy to get rid of, if that was to be part of the plan.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, speaking about AFLW, you've coached men, you're coaching, your kids as well, and you coached women, or you're coaching women. What's the key differences in coaching men and women in your sort of experience?
I think with the AFLW, I don't know how this would be at junior level if you're coaching young girls, because a lot of young girls have been playing now since they were 7 or 8, and they're footballers who just happen to be girls, not girl footballers, and I think there's a real big difference with that. And this is the thing we're seeing with the AFLW at the moment. Like Maddie Prasparkas, who won the league medal this year, has been playing footy since she was 6. She's not a female footballer. She's a footballer who just happens to be female. Yeah. And there's a really big difference in that. So one of the challenges I've faced at Collingwood, because it was my first time dealing with female footballers, was that they just don't have the breadth of knowledge or the years of training. It's just it's a really different game to coaching boys / men who have been playing since they were 6 and 7 years of age, going back to the thing we talked about earlier, Pods, about living to learn, learning to live and living to learn. The more you play, the better you'll be. But a lot of these players in the AFLW in the first couple of years, they played 3, 4, maybe 5 years max, maybe. Yeah. So their understanding of the game, let alone what it looked like at a really high intensity level, at this national level, was totally foreign to them. So you really had to keep things really simple. And I think one of the issues in the first year of AFLW, just watching it from afar, I wasn't involved, was that the clubs are trying to make it like men's footy. And it wasn't, because the men are more developed. They've had more years in the system. They had resource coaching. They've had pathways, all that stuff that didn't exist at the start of the AFLW. You can't coach that system with that group, that playing cohort, because they didn't understand what you're talking about in the first place. So the challenge coaching women for me is knowing what they've learned and what they've been through and understanding their time in the game. Because if there's been, one of the dads coaching, which we love, and we love mums and dads getting involved in coaching kids sport, and I think it's fantastic, and even adult sport, get involved. But if there's not a lot of expertise, or there's no pathway coaching, or there's no development phase, you're coming in with the really raw product. And if you want to try and play an elite brand of football or make them elite athletes after being so raw for so long, then you've got no chance. You're playing the wrong game, you're involved in the wrong system. So the challenge about coaching the girls was to understand their level and build them from where they were. The other thing is they love, because they haven't had that investment of time and resources, feedback. They just ache for feedback. Now, I know when I was coaching local footy for men and boys, never coached boys, but men, that feedback was important, and they sort of needed it every now and then. But the girls, because it's all new and because they've been given all this opportunity that they've never had but they've always desired, they're at you for info. Just give me what you got. And I don't care what it is, and I'll think it's mundane and boring and it's useless, but they'll all eat it up and they'll love it. So it's the understanding that the desire for learning and the thirst for learning is much more significant in my time in women's footy than it ever was at local men's footy, because they just never had that opportunity. They didn't have the system or the resources. There was no assistant coaches at the local clubs. There was no high performance coaches. There was no staff or general manager operations. There was none of that going on. So one of the best parts for me in this role in the AFLW is, unlike a lot of local clubs where you wear a lot of hats and play many roles, I just get to coach. So I just get that time one-on-one to coach them, or from a group from a senior coaching perspective. I don't have to worry about the jumpers and the bibs and the footies and who's cleaning the boots and all that sort of stuff. I don't have to worry about it. I just get to coach. So that's one of the big differences. And then there's the element of I think, whilst I'm a very tactile person, I'm a really physical person. I like to hug and high five and get you in and get you tight, be a man or a woman. They seem to be more forthcoming with the physical emotion than the men are. And you being ready for that's really important if you're going to coach women as well. And I've said to a lot of people often ask me, how do you do that? You're a man in a woman's world. How does that work? I said, well, it's no different to your kids or your wife or your friends who happen to be female. Just treat them like people and they will respond accordingly.
Yeah.
They're footballers and you've got to coach them as footballers, but treat them like people. And you'll be amazed at the response you get. And if they want to come in and give you a hug, give them a hug, for God's sake. And don't be afraid of that. If you're coming from a good place and you in my job, you've got to love them real quick, and they know that they need to be loved. And I do love them. I fall in love real quick with the groups of girls that I've coached.
That's great.
And I love that part of what women's footy's done for me. But I was a physical coach with the boys. Well, I often just come up and give them a hug and give them a rap and tap them on the bum and that sort of stuff. I'm not afraid to do that. Some people, it's not their thing, and I get that, and that's cool. But I think women's footballers, from my experience anyway, in 3 years, they really appreciate the fact that you can be, and you're there for them if that's their thing as well. That's
great advice, mate. And thanks for answering that question with complete transparency and honesty. But looking at AFLW from the outside, and I'm fortunate I'm friends with a couple of AFLW players as well, but they just look so hungry and so motivated to be better. You mentioned just about being better. It's fantastic. And obviously, they're in the infinite stages of their the elite competition and their journey as footballers. But how have you sort of harnessed that high level of motivation?
Yeah, well, I think when you've got that in any group you've coached, you're a long way down the track of being able to achieve and make a difference in their world. And that's quite difficult, because when you've got 30 of them in the groups that we deal with in the AFLW who are also so intent on being best, it can become quite intense and quite overwhelming from a coaching perspective. And we've got 4 coaches plus a development coach, and trying to divvy them up to get each coach to get the most out of the players to get the most out of each coach can be quite overwhelming, because again, you're still dealing with that limited time frame after work hours. But everyone needs that love. Everyone needs that one-on-one assistance, because they have that thirst, they have that desire and drive to be the best. So it's almost a ticking a box exercise. I have a list on my whiteboard. Who have I got to this week about their skills, and who have I got to about their life, and ticking them off and going through, making sure you just got to get there. In my role, I can do it. Local footy's a bit harder, as we talked about before. But in my role, with a little bit more time up my sleeve during the days, I can catch up for a coffee, or I can talk about, get them 10 minutes before training or half an hour before training, and just do 10 minutes here and there. And it's about the way you're satisfying it is having those touch points consistently is the answer, I reckon, to the question. Bit easier in these more semi full-time, permanent part-time roles than local sport. I understand that, but it's when you've got that level of drive, you've got to feed it, because if it starts to dissipate, then it can start to, once one goes, then the second one goes, and all of a sudden you've got a group of players that are starting to lose that edge, which makes the competition, which makes the environment so healthy and so competitive.
Yeah. I mean, you're halfway there when you got motivated players walking in the door every training session. So, mate, great answer. Hey, we're getting towards the end. We've only got about 5 or so minutes to go. So I just want to answer some of these questions from the coaches out there that have typed in the group.
Yep.
A good one here from Kieran. He's a novice coach, coaching his second year. It's a under 14 mixed team. How does a novice coach accelerate their learning? Is the question.
Yeah, well, I think there's some great resources online these days. Coaching courses are really good. And even little updates. Mentors.
Yeah.
I'd be all over them. Mentors and coaches and onlines and all those programs you can do. Throw yourself into learning about the game. Absolutely. If you had he's got no AFL background, I see, Kieran, but he might have some footy background. Understand what you know first. What you know is really important. Because then once you know what you know, you work out what you don't know. And then you can start to shape yourself as a coach and work out what you think you might need to learn. And you don't necessarily know everything. But understand what you know is really important, and then work out what you think you might need to know and really drill down into your resources. And there's some outstanding resources out there for coaches to get involved in and to use. So give yourself a chance, an hour a week. If you can squeeze an hour a week into a bit of development with all that stuff, then it's an hour well spent, I reckon. And the other thing is, know you don't need to know everything.
You're not the expert.
You don't need to be everything to everything. Just do what you do really well, and then you'll be able to work around it on the edges.
Great advice. Hey, what's one from Matt here? What's one lesson you've learnt from one of the coaches that actually coach you that's still with you now?
Oh, for the coaches who's still with me. Yeah, okay. So I'll talk about Shannon.
Sorry, one of the coaches that coached you. What's a lesson that you've got in the memory bank?
Oh, I think, Chris Connolly is the one I mentioned before, and he was the assistant at Hawthorn when I was there for basically the majority of my time there. And one of the lessons was he'd pull you into his office. Somehow he had the best office. I don't know how that worked. He had the best office, and he'd pull you in, and he would week in, week out, he'd say, "What do you think about the way I coached?" And I week in, I knew it was coming, but I very rarely had a decent answer for him because I wasn't worried about him. He was worried about me. I had my head up my backside.
Yeah.
What do you think about the way I coached? And I thought, once 10, 15 years down the track, 20 years down the track now, you start to think that that's a really good question to ask yourself after a game. How did you
learn and reflect?
Yep. Yeah, and that's what you're talking about before. That was a real good lesson for me in my coaching career at the start. I didn't do it at the start. It was a good lesson I should have done. And then I remembered it, and it made me a hell of a lot better coach to understand what I did well and what I didn't do so well. So reflection, what did you do? And then ask your players, how did I coach on the weekend?
Yeah, great.
See what feedback you get. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's not so good. Be careful.
Sometimes it's true.
Most of the time it's true.
Most of the time it's true. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As long as it's not an opinion, that's the main thing. As long as it's constructive feedback. A couple of questions here before we go. I've got a quick 6 questions here, mate, before we finish up, but some good questions here. One from Mark here about coaching under 13 girls. What's the best piece of advice you can give that will that you learnt from coaching girls so far? So you sort of mentioned it, but
yeah, well, kids. I'm coaching I'm assistant coaching under 13s at my son's team as well, so I'm dealing with that bracket of boys at the moment. So make them love the game. Make it a really positive, enjoyable environment, because you'll be amazed at the benefit you get from someone who's really positive about being where they are and going to training, because they'll focus, and then you'll get a captive audience that you can really mold the way you need to mold them. Outside of that, it's fundamentals. Get it right, but make it fun and let them love the game. If they don't love the game, then they won't come back, and they'll never get better.
Coaching at breaks, quarter time, half time, 3/4 time, how much information do you give players?
Great question. Not much. I think we get 6 or 7 minutes, and by the time the assistant coaches have got them, I get about 90 seconds, I reckon. So what I do at the breaks is if there's something happening, either positively or negatively, sometimes both, I'll identify that, whatever that is, and then a quick reason why. But then you've got to start to move forward really quick. If you spend all your break time reflecting, the players will sit there and go, well, hang on, well, that's fantastic, but it's actually no good to us going forward now. So you've got to have an answer or something going forward for them to hang on to for the next period, for that next quarter of footy. So reflect really shortly and understand why things are happening, get them to understand why things have happened, positively or negatively, and then give them a reason to make sure that they know why the next thing will happen positively in the next quarter, next period of game, I reckon. Yeah.
Great.
So it only needs to be 90 seconds, 2 minutes. Doesn't need to go on too long. Players don't listen anyway.
Hey, last question from the group here, and this was one that was sent to us during the week, and I think it's a good one and relevant to what you're sort of talking about with juniors, but also interested to hear your thoughts on around coaching AFLW players, and that's coaching tackle technique. So what's the best piece of advice you've got for juniors, but also in your time, and you've got a lot of AFLW players that either played volleyball or soccer, pre picking up a full contact sport like AFL. What's some advice you've got for our coaches there?
I think tackling, the most important part of tackling is your feet. That might sound stupid, but if you're out of position when you're tackling, you're going to put yourself in a really vulnerable spot a lot of times. So we do a lot of work on our feet, really strong feet position, base of support, and then it's obviously getting low and getting your head to the side, making sure you're not getting your head front on. So technique's really important, but we focus a lot on feet, footwork, getting into tackling, getting into the right spot initially, and then you can start to shape how they react from the upper body. Clearly, we had some issues in the game, in the competition the first couple of years of players just ramming front on. And junior footy, there's a lot of that happens as well, and I've seen it week in, week out with my son's team. So that is absolutely on us as coaches to get right. So I would focus initially on footwork, and then you start to shape the body depending on which angle the tackle is coming from or you are tackling on. But I think footwork is a massively underrated part of tackling in terms of a junior perspective. Get them in the right spot before they tackle.
Great advice. Hey, last thing, mate, quick six. I do this with all our coaching mentors that come on. I've got 6 quick questions for you. Take as long as you want to answer them. But first one, give us one book you can recommend our coaches to read right now.
Oh, it's I knew this was coming, this question. I can't remember the bloody name of the book. I had it here. It's about Barcelona FC. It's a bloody ripper.
We'll come back to it. Give us one.
Give me 15 seconds. I'll get it. I know where it is. Give me 15 seconds. I'm coming.
Great. Wonder whether this happens on the radio when Harf hosts his breakfast show. Just walks off. Bit awkward.
It's called the Barcelona Way. There you go. The Barcelona.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I have heard of that. Thanks, mate. Nice.
Read it. It's absolutely magnificent.
Barcelona Way.
Sorry,
hey, that's good. I just asked the audience, do you do that on radio sometimes when you just walk off and...
That's the beauty of a co-host. You got to just
exactly. Yeah, I'm not good at that. Hey, one second question. One short YouTube or TED Talk clip that you can recommend our coaches to listen or hear, watch.
I love The Power of Yet.
Yeah, great.
Watch that. Watch that. Oh, I do love that. That messaging is really, really good for coaches.
And one podcast that you listen to or recommend?
I must admit, I'm not a podcast person. Pods? Oh, pardon the pun. I'm not really a podcast person. I haven't got time. In the car, I like to tune out from the world and just listen to music. And when I'm at work, I'm too busy talking, as you can probably tell.
Great. One coaching point of us around this on teaching ground balls.
1 point. I've got a couple for you. Feet and fingers. It's the F's. Feet and fingers. Good. It's all about the F's in the ground ball, and sometimes you have to use the F every now and then just because you're frustrated. But it's feet and fingers for me.
Yeah, great. Question 5: one game you play with players that's not footy, and why?
We play speaking of ground balls, we play a ground ball corridor tennis ball game. Yeah. So it's opposition. Obviously, it's 6-on-6 normally. Sometimes it goes out to 8-on-8, and it's basically corridor footy in the old chestnut, but it's with a tennis ball, and you can only move the ball on the ground with a tennis ball, and then we get another bigger ball to come in. Then we finally use a footy as a footy component. But
yeah, great.
It's ground ball, tennis ball, footy. It's really cool. It's good fun. It's basically a corridor footy, 6-on-6. The ball can only be on the ground, but you've got to pick it up cleanly to pass it off on the ground to your teammate.
Great, love it. Love the sound of that. Yeah, except I'm too tall for ground balls, mate. I was a marking forward.
Get your feet in the right spot.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Fingers and feet. Got it. Number 6, last one. What's your most important value?
Most important value. Oh, gee whiz. I think my most important value is respect. Respect for everyone that you come across. And as a senior coach, I think that's a really important thing, because you come across so many different people in so many varied roles. And that can be, from a Carlton perspective, you got your fan who just loves your footy club and just loves the fact that the Navy Blues out there every week, and the passion that they evoke is quite special. But you've got to be able to respect them for that. You've got to be able to respect the president, respect the head trainer, and understand their role. Respect and understand their role. So I think respect is, and the players for what they are, and understand them as people as well. So I think respect is probably my most important value. And I think it goes for life too. You try and teach your kids all that sort of stuff, don't you? That respect people for who they are, and don't judge them. Just respect them and just work with them. And once you do that, you get a really positive response more often than not.
Mate, that's I agree, and it's a fantastic spot for us to finish up, mate. Harf, just want to thank you for your time. Number one, obviously, you've volunteered your time. You're not in coaching season technically, and we're all going through a tough time. But mate, thanks very much for doing this, and all our coaches, I'm sure, will appreciate it. I sort of didn't know what to expect. I know I've been on the other side of the fence when you've interviewed me on the radio a couple of times on your show. So I was a little bit nervous about talking coaching with you. I didn't know what to, as I said, expect. But clearly, you've got a deeper passion than even I thought that you had about coaching. And I wish you all the best. Clearly, any club that you're going to be at, Carlton or beyond, you're going to make the club better. We can clearly see that, mate. So thanks very much for sharing your coaching journey tonight on Max Mentors.
Good on you, buddy. Anytime, happy to help. And as any good coach knows, it's all going beautiful until you get sacked. So just keep going.
Great, mate. Just like radio.
Correct. Correct.
Don't worry, we're all there.
Good on you, buddy.
All right.